The Vikings were known for their exploration, toughness, and ability to survive in some of the harshest environments in history. But beyond all the myth and the battles, the Vikings relied on practical survival skills that made them thrive in the wild. In this video, we will take a look at 5 essential Viking survival skills. Skills that were the key to everyday life and are still useful today. And I think that you can learn these skills too. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. First up is fire making. For the Vikings, fire was essential, not only for cooking, but also for warmth and protection. Let's take a look on how they sparked the flame in the wild using simple techniques and natural materials. When you strike a piece of steel against flint, tiny pieces of metal are shaved off. The friction and the force of the strike heat those tiny metal fragments until they turn into sparks, hot enough to ignite dry tinder. The spark is the first step in starting a fire. The spark must hit a conductor, such as char cloth, tinder fungus, or tiny shavings of birch bark that will easily hold the ember. Sometimes a bird's nest of dry plant fibers is used. It is also possible to use fatwood shavings, birch bark, or even flussed up rope. I like to try different things when I light my fires, but let me know, what is your favorite way to start a fire or light a flame in the wild? Next, we're diving into how the Vikings made tar and glue. These sticky substances were surprisingly important for fixing tools, waterproofing boats, or even for making weapons. And believe it or not, they did all of this without any use of modern equipment. Tar production was most likely done on a larger industrial scale, with the large quantities needed in the craft of boat building. But it is possible to do a small on-the-go setup that can supply you with oil and tar. In a tar kiln, birch bark is slowly heated up in a low oxygen environment, usually by burying it in the ground with a fire on top. Instead of burning, the tar breaks down and releases tar that is then collected in a small container below. This process is called dry distillation, and that's how the Vikings produced the sticky substance, which is birch bark oil or tar. The tar is useful for waterproofing leather and wood, but also works great to caulk the space between boards on wooden houses or boats. Glues can be made in various ways. The tar can be reduced and added with charcoal powder to produce pitch, a form of glue used to fasten arrowheads on the shaft, and it's known since the early ages to fasten flint blades to handles. Another glue is made from pine resin collected from a damaged pine tree, then melted down and mixed with organic fibres and charcoal. I have made glues like this on the go to fix arrow tips to the shaft, or to fasten a knife handle into its blade, or even to decorate the small decorative grooves on bone and antler. These glues harden when they cool off and can be easily transported and stored. When needed, just simply heat them up and they're ready to use. Hide glue and cheese glues were also known in the Viking Age, proving that the need to produce adhesive were in high demand. What is your favourite bushcraft style glue? Let me know in the comments below. When you're out in the wild, knowing what to eat and what to use can mean the difference between serious trouble and survival. The Vikings knew how to identify useful plants and edible foods and to gather natural materials in the nature. And I believe that you can learn this as well. There is no doubt that the Vikings knew about herbal medicine, and that would have been one of their keys to survival. Sadly, we have no evidence of the Vikings foraging for wild edible mushrooms, but it is unlikely to think that they would have missed this culinary opportunity for food. At least here in the north, gathering mushrooms is an ancient tradition that highlights the spoils of autumn. Wild garlic, apples and berries are some of the most easy foods to find in nature. For the Vikings, the most challenging part was to make food accessible all throughout the seasons. Cheese and butter making was a way to preserve milk. Grains and flour production made the harvested cereals stretch into the winter times. Drying fruit and meat, smoking and fermenting could have been other ways to secure a steady food supply. But nature does not only offer food for the forager. Valuable materials for crafts, bone, shells, amber, pine resin, birch bark, wood and lumber, or spruce roots. These are just a few examples on how the Vikings knew about and depended on the land, not only to survive, but also to thrive. Let me know if you have a favourite food that can be gathered from the wild, or a material that can be harvested from nature. A good shelter can protect you from the cold and the wind and the rain, something that the Vikings understood very well. For the most part, the Vikings lived in houses or smaller farmsteads, but for hunting expeditions, during sea voyages or longer land travels, they needed to find shelter from the elements. This is very basic, but unfortunately not a field where archaeology is very helpful. One theory is that the Vikings utilized the sails from their ships. The sail could easily be transformed into a shelter by hanging it up or simply by crouching underneath it. I have made experiments with a small sail making shelter for one person. We have done larger setups with a sail from a bigger vessel to provide shelter and shade for a whole camp of up to 30 people for several days. You could also just sleep under the open sky. But to be honest, with the Scandinavian climate, most often you would really appreciate some shelter. We know very little of tents from the Viking Age, but we know about the work and thereby value that was put into even a small sail. Large pieces of woolen or linen fabric represented unimaginable value. And that makes you wonder, how did the Vikings actually camp out when traveling? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Finally, let's talk about light. In a time without electricity, the Vikings used animal fat to create simple but effective light sources. Besides the big open fireplace found in most excavated remains of Viking houses, we have a few good examples of lamps made from iron or clay or soapstone. Any animal fat can be used to fuel a lamp and must be rendered and melted down, then strained and poured into the lamps. Any fireproof container will work, and with a wick added, you have a light source. For wicks, most organic materials will work. Reeds, rope, linen, or even types of dried fungus. The lamp will burn bright and steady, but the smell will depend on the fat and the way it's been rendered. I use pork belly fat for my lamps, and while the rendering is fairly smelly, once they're burning, it's almost without a scent. The Vikings knew about rolled or dipped wax candles, but these must have been a very expensive way to light your home, as well as oil lamps. So most likely, the open fat lamps were the steady stock of indoor lighting in the Viking Age. So these were my picks for 5 essential Viking survival skills. These are simple, practical techniques that our ancestors used to stay alive, and I believe that they are still very useful even to this day. If you liked the video, let me know in the comments below. Feel free to like and share and subscribe and all this stuff, you know how it goes. And I'm curious to know, did I leave something important out, and what is your top 5 survival skills from the Viking Age? If you are new to this channel, or if you would like to continue watching, I put some links in the video description below. Most of the techniques and the skills I've been talking about in this video, I have made longer videos about before. Videos where I explain in further detail and in a longer format about some of these skills. So check it out, and I guarantee you that there will be something very enjoyable there for you to watch.